Hey Ethos, thanks for being here this morning. If you grabbed a Thanksgiving box last Sunday and filled them up with groceries, you should have dropped those boxes off here at church on your way in today. If you didn't bring your box this morning, we do ask that sometime before the 21st, you drop your boxes off here at church. Please don't take them to Ethos & Co., as we'll be keeping the boxes here at church until we distribute them on the 22nd. You can just leave them outside at the front door. If you would like to sign up to help deliver these boxes on the 22nd, you can still sign up online today. Thank you for generously donating food items to our food pantry families so they can have an amazing Thanksgiving meal this year. Well, Ethos Youth, you are meeting this Wednesday the 19th at 7 p.m., but will be off the following Wednesday due to Thanksgiving. So be sure to join us this Wednesday night, and then we'll regather together in December. The 19th is also a prayer gathering. No matter where you are on your faith journey or how familiar you are with prayer, whether that be in your own personal time or in a corporate setting, these prayer gatherings are for you. Come out to church on the 19th at 7 p.m. and invite some of your friends to join you. Parents, next Sunday is Jersey Sunday back in Ethos Kids. So if your child has a favorite sports team or you're trying to get them to become a fan, then dress them up in their favorite jersey that morning. And you can dress up too if you really want to. And finally, we mentioned recently that beginning in January, Ethos would begin hosting ESL, or English as a Second Language, classes. We're really excited to begin this new journey, and we want you to be involved. If you're interested in serving or you want to learn more about what these classes will look like, then join us for an interest meeting in the Servant Leader Lounge after all gatherings on Sunday, November 30th and December 7th. There, you'll hear briefly about our vision and the variety of ways that you can serve. We hope to see you there. Well, that's all the announcements that I have for today. Let's continue in our series together.
Well, good morning again, everybody. It's so good to see y'all in the room. I want to welcome everybody watching online as well as everybody out in the foyer. If you're here right now in this particular room, can we just welcome all of those in the foyer as well as all of those watching online? Man, we're still one church in a couple different rooms. And if you are newer to this space or really to any Ethos environment, my name is Jordan, and I get the unique honor, it really is an honor to be the lead pastor here. And it brings a lot of joy to my heart. It's not lost on me that you're here today. I'm really grateful that you're in the room or that you're hanging with us online, but in particular in the room, it's very life-giving for me to see your faces. And I hope that's not lost on you, because this is not preacher rhetoric. It's not something that I'm paid to say. It's just I had one of those weeks this past week where you experienced the full gamut of emotions. You ever had those weeks before? Lots of extreme highs and extreme lows in a really short amount of time. We began our week just 7 days ago, officiating a wedding for some dear friends of ours down south, and several of you were able to make that journey as well, because they're folks who come here to Ethos, but they're longtime family friends of my wife and I as well, and so we journeyed down there. At the same time, we had to hurry back to Pennsylvania on the East Coast, where I'm from, because an uncle in my life, one of just those dear uncles, you know how you have those certain relatives that just like make a really significant impact on your life, and he had a stroke and had passed away, and so his funeral was on Thursday. Then on Friday, another friend of ours, many of whom you knew as well, and were able to attend the funeral on Friday at Heritage Church. Mike Petticord had passed away from a sudden heart attack too, and then last night went to the Buckeye game and experienced a W, you know, and that was great. UCLA, nonetheless, was still a W, and it's just one of those weeks. And to be quite honest with you, showed up to church this morning. I was like, man, I need this place. I need this place. And I just discovered, not just in 7 years of pastoring Ethos, but for as long as I can remember, my dad made me go to church. And as I look back on my life, it really is true that we're better for having been together. And if you anchor yourself long enough in a community and you live enough life in depth of relationship with people, and you allow those anchors in life to kind of keep you there, even when things are good or bad, you find out at the end of it all, like, we're better for having been together. And I just realized this morning as I showed up, I was like, man, I'm gonna leave here better today. And listen, my therapist has convinced me that if I'm not crying, something's wrong, okay? So if I don't cry, it's bad. Like sometimes, I kid you not, where I've showed up and she's like, no tears? I'm like, nah, man, this is good, I'm hardened. And she's like, okay, we got some work to do, you know, because you're a crier. And so I just want to say thank you, though, for being here. And I know that we all show up to church on Sunday morning for a whole myriad of reasons. But regardless of why you're here, man, we're just grateful that we're together right now. So can we close our eyes just to avoid distraction and take a moment to pray? would you consider just even taking a big deep breath as a way of which just being present right here. Sometimes breathing just slows our heart rate down and allows us to think more clearly and to be more present. So Father, we are grateful for your presence here now, for your presence that's made real in the presence of the people around us. And so would you meet us here in this space, wherever we are, meet our kids back in their classrooms, wherever they are. And would you continue to unite your church? God, we just pray a blessing over the capital C church of our city. And just ask that your grace and your wisdom and your favor would continually be poured out on all of the local churches across our community. In Jesus' name. Everybody who agreed said, amen. Well, hey, before we jump into week 3 of our series called Pace, I just want to remind us that next weekend we're kicking off our Living the Liturgy initiative. This is our year-end giving campaign, or year-end giving initiative, where we're also revealing the 3D renderings of our building expansion, because our Living the Liturgy, which comes, of course, from the liturgy, the prayer that we read every single Sunday when we take that moment just to remind ourselves is why we practice generosity. We don't just want to pray it, we want to live it. And so that's where that phrase comes from. And this is really an initiative to kind of kickstart our building renovations, which we plan to begin in 2026. And we're going to share all the information about that next weekend. We're going to get some material in your hands, show you some pictures. And honest to God, I'm pretty stoked about it because it's just kind of been like buried in the just kind of everything else that we've had going on. We've been waiting for our architect to get the final renditions to us, and we have them now for the last couple of weeks. And since we've had them in hand, I could not wait to share them with you all. And in addition to sharing about the building renovations and the updates there, we're also just going to kind of share what's to come in 2026. So every year we do something called Vision Weekend. Just kind of lay out, where do we sense God's leading us, and where do we sense the Spirit is guiding us in the new year? And so next weekend, we're going to do some of that, all within the framework of this series. It's kind of a perfect series, to be quite honest, and you'll see more of that next weekend to lay all of this out together. You with me? And so as I told at 8 a.m., if you're in town, I get it. If you're not in town, I mean, I totally understand. If you're not well, you got a kid that's sick, I totally get it. But if you're in town, would you make it a priority to be in person next weekend? Because there's going to be something kind of exciting just to be together as we share all of these pictures and just share the vision of what we really sense God is leading us into in the new year. And if you're not able to be in person, would you just catch up online via podcast or YouTube? Because we can journey together better when we're all in the same page, when we're united as it relates to where we're going in the future. Well, I want to just pick up where we left off 2 weeks ago, and really where our friend Noah pastors up in Cleveland, where he left off last weekend, which is kind of a quick recap. In Genesis chapter 1, in the very beginning, the first book of the Bible, God said, let us make mankind in our image. Everybody say image. In our likeness, so that they may rule. And we identified 2 weeks ago, and Noah highlighted in greater detail last weekend, that this word image comes from the Hebrew word salim, which means idol or statue, a visible representation of an invisible being. In other words, we were put on earth to make visible the invisible God, to show the world what God is like. And that feels, in many senses of the word, like it's a weighty responsibility. But friends, I'm telling you, it's an incredible honor and privilege too, when we lean in and understand what we actually have before us, like what the Lord is inviting us into. And so as we take a step further, I want to look this weekend and kind of use the working title of work as worship as our framework for where we're going to go the rest of the morning. So if you're taking notes, that's our title this morning, work as worship. Now, ironically, most Christians think of worship as something that you only do inside the church, right? Like, that's the moment that we just concluded a couple minutes ago when Evan and the team led us so beautifully in song. Or worship is the thing that you do when you put, your favorite Brandon Lake, Chris Tomlin, or Upper Room song on the radio as you're headed to your place of employment, your place of work. And when people get serious about God, we think, well, then they're going to join a ministry at church, go on a missions trip, maybe donate food to the pantry. But if God has any interest in our work, the lie that we've bought into is we assume that just means, well, don't cheat, don't lie, don't steal, and give a portion of your paycheck back to some nonprofit that's making the real difference in the community. Because our work hasn't necessarily been viewed as as a means of worshiping God. In fact, we picture, come on, I know this is true. We picture bringing God into the workplace as a bit cringy, right? Like immediately we kind of assume it's the coffee shop who calls himself Hebrews, right? Come on, somebody, you ever seen that? I have twice in my lifetime. Or it's the salesman who ends his pitch with, now that I've sold you life insurance, can we talk about eternal insurance, right? Or now that I've got your name on my mailing list, can we talk about if your name is in the Lamb's Book of Life? Right? And I'm actually not intending to make complete light of that or to make fun of that, because I think it takes a lot of courage to find ways to introduce the salvation message into people's world. However, I think work as worship is a whole lot more than that. And to be quite honest with you, in time, a whole lot even more valuable than simply that. I think oftentimes we forget that God's first command, as we highlighted 2 weeks ago, wasn't go to church. It was get to work. Fill the earth with my image. In fact, as we concluded 2 weeks ago, we identified there's kind of one question. If we could just simplify in many senses of the word following Jesus down to one simple question, it might look something like this. If Jesus were me, if he were you, if he lived where I live, had my job, my education, made my salary, had my family, how would he live? Because following Jesus, friends, this is the invitation. Following Jesus is the process of answering that question. It's the project of life. Because it's not a product, meaning you don't arrive at the answer to that question one time in your life. It's a project, a process that you continually discover as you journey through life. And so as we take this just a step further this weekend, I want to wrestle with this question. Do you see your work as an essential part of following Jesus? Whatever it is that you do, paid or unpaid, wherever you find yourself tomorrow morning at 10 a.m., do you see that as the primary way that you join him in his work of establishing his kingdom? Pause for dramatic effect. Because if you would answer that question, nah, I don't think so, man. Sorry, pastor. Then I would say, maybe you should. Because learning how to become a really good mom or dad and a really good follower of Jesus are the exact same thing. Learning how to become a really good accountant and a really good landscaper, as well as a really good follower of Jesus, it's the exact same thing. Learning how to become a great photographer and a great leader and a really good follower of Jesus are the exact same thing. Can we just kind of go back a few years, for some of us, many years, and reflect on career day or shadow day when you were in school? Anybody remember that? It was the day when you had, okay, 3 of you. Man, yeah, first gathering, 8 a.m., like they were like, yep, totally remember. Apparently, they had better memories than the 9:30. Anyway, but shadow day was that day where you were asked, we had 2 of them in 8th grade and in 10th grade, to find somebody who had a career or was in some sort of organization that you had a degree of interest or passion for, and you kind of see the behind the scenes of what they do, right? Like shadow day was kind of fun because it was the day that you got to skip school, and if you were lucky enough, the person you were shadowing was like, you can go home even early. Like it's a half day. Like I was like, let me just ask you, before I ask if I can shadow you, how long do I have to be here for? Like, is this gonna be longer or shorter than school, okay? But imagine with me for a moment if Jesus showed up at your place of work, paid or unpaid, wherever you find yourself on Tuesday at 3 p.m., and he shadowed you. What would he discover? How would he see you doing your work? Now, let's reverse that question just for a moment. What if Jesus had your job, and then he invited you to shadow him? And he said, for 24 hours, I want to show you what it looks like to work as worship. I want you to see that if I came today, I could have your job, meaning he could very well do what you do, that Jesus would not and does not see what you do as beneath him. He could live in your house, your apartment, your dorm. He could work your job, have your education, skill set, and none of that would keep Jesus from a 24/7 life in the kingdom of God. None of that would keep him from doing your work as a means of worship. Because friends, here's kind of if you fell asleep up to this point, here's kind of the statement that transitions the rest of our sermon this morning. It's not what you do that makes work worship. It's why and how you do it. Because 2 people can find themselves doing the exact same thing tomorrow at 11 a.m., And one worships their work, and the other worships God through their work. It's work as worship or work as an idol. Now, when we hear that word idol in church, in particular as Christians, now, if you're not a follower of Jesus, we're so glad that you're here, man. We hope that you feel welcomed. We also hope that you know that you don't have to believe what we believe in order to belong right here. But also, there are a lot of people around you right now who are deeply passionate about following Jesus, deeply committed to saying, I want to become more and more like Christ, even at my work. And in general, when we hear the word idol in church, we're like, I don't really want to touch that with like a 39.5-foot pole. You know what I'm saying? Like, come on, Dr. Seuss, anybody in here? Yeah. Like, I want nothing to do with that word idol. And in fact, I think there's a lot of health to that, yet at the same time, there's a detriment because sometimes then we can't recognize the own idols in our lives. And when we don't see, in particular, work as worship, and maybe more transparently, when we don't see the way that sometimes work can become idolatrous, we lose the true meaning of work. In fact, I think there's two great ditches, two far extremes that we find ourselves as it relates to work as an idol. Again, your work could be school, your work could be parenting, your work could be self-employment. I'm talking about whatever you find yourself doing tomorrow, paid or unpaid. And these two extremes are, on one side, I do it simply as a means of comfort and pleasure, just to kind of get through the week, to get to Friday, to get to the thing I really want to get to. Or the other ditch, the other idol, is I'm just pursuing power and approval. And so I work with no end in sight because I never have enough approval and I've never gained enough influence or power. Now, on one extreme, it's impossible for a person to work as hard as is necessary if comfort and pleasure is the goal in order to have a faithful and fruitful career. But then on the other ditch, it can lead to overwork, becoming ruthless in your work practices, having an unbalanced lifestyle. And friends, listen, hear me. Idols are always easier to see in your neighbor than they are in yourself, which is why we need relationships. It's why we need our communities that journey together for a year in deep relationships. It's why we need our small groups that are open-ended, open invitation, not quite the same commitment as communities. It's why we need, as self-serving as this might sound, I don't intend for it to be that way, Sunday mornings, because it allows us to hold that mirror up just once a week to say, God, I want to become more like you, because it's in becoming more like Christ that I find more contentment. I find more fulfillment. I find the promise of Jesus in John chapter 10 applied in my life, that I begin to experience the abundant life that Jesus came to give me. But it's only when I begin to recognize the idols and I turn towards worship. I don't know about you, but the person who most frequently reveals the idols in my life is my wife. Like, I'm so grateful for that too. We need people in our world who will say, I think that maybe you are idolizing, in this case, work. And so I want to just spend the remaining time that we have together looking at 8 things. We're going to breeze through them pretty quickly as we identify work as an idol or work as worship. And I just want to see if the shoe fits. And I know in particular for me, there's 3 of these that resonates deeply and that I have to keep before me on a regular basis, or else I begin to view work more as an idol than I do as worship. The first one is, when work defines your identity, it's an idol. But when your identity flows from who you are and then flows into your work, it's worship. In other words, on one side, if you succeed, you feel valuable. But if you lose, you feel worthless. Think of the athlete who retires and says, I don't know who I am without the game. Think of Aaron Rodgers, who can't give up his cleats because he doesn't know who he is. Sorry, all the Packers fans out there. Or think about the parent who, when the kids move out of the house, they feel lost because, man, everything I did and everything I was just revolving around my children. But when work is worship, you know who you are before and after you clock in, before and after you clock out. You know that you're already loved. You're already chosen, you're already secure, and your job becomes an expression of your identity, not the source of your identity. In other words, your job becomes an expression of your Myers-Briggs, of your Enneagram, of your unique gift sets, all in the name of showing more and more people who Jesus is, not so that you can become more like somebody else who's showing people who Jesus is, but that you, as God uniquely wired you, showing more and more people who Jesus is. I love what the Apostle John said. See how very much our Father loves us, for he calls us his children. That's who we are. It's not a result of what we do. It's a result of who we are. I think of my friends Rob and Jan Ritter, who are out in the foyer right now. They're serving on the coffee team a few moments ago, and several years ago they retired. But their work wasn't their source of their identity. Their work was an expression of their identity. And so when they retired, they just found new margin in their world. Every Tuesday morning, you can now find them with the same identity serving in our food pantry from 10 to noon. That's at Africa Road at the Ethos & Co. Cafe. You walk in the doors, look to the left, and there you will see the pantry and the Ritters. They serve on our pre- and post-marital teams because they have new margin, new opportunities. They lead a community group for the church with a bunch of other couples in the church because their work wasn't their identity. It was an expression of their identity, and now there's new opportunity, same identity. When work is a idol, your self-worth rises and falls with performance. But when it's worship, your worth is rooted in grace, not in grades. When work is an idol, man, you live on a roller coaster of results. This one hits home for me, and I'd imagine it does for many of you as well. You get a good review, you feel valuable. You have a failed project, you feel like a failure. Remember when you were in grade school and you would get your report card, like that particular day? Like, I remember we would get like a physical report card, and we were asked not to open it until our parents opened it. I don't know if anybody else remembers this before the days of digital report cards. Those particular days, man, you felt so judged by the letter on that report card. I remember when I was in 11th grade, it was the end of the year. We had just finished our final English papers, and our teacher had placed all of our grades up on the chalkboard, not a whiteboard, chalkboard. Come on, somebody. And put all of our grades up on the chalk, not with our names beside it, but just said how many people had received each one of these grades. There was one D. One person received a D. Yours truly. Come on, somebody. All glory to God. And I remember getting my final paper and looking at it and being like, I'm the one D? I felt like such a failure. Ironically now, much of my job involves writing. I write a lot. So, Mr. Baker, take that, But it just felt like, man, like I didn't know what to do with that. And some of us still do that, not with grades, but with sales goals and social media likes, compliments from the boss. But when work is worship, your performance doesn't determine your identity. When work is an idol, you're constantly busy. There's no peace in your life. But when work is worship, rest and margin are built into the rhythm of your life. Now, we're going to dive a whole lot more into this in 2 weeks. The last 2 weeks, today and next week, really are a working theology of work. And then in 2 weeks, we're going to kick off like this working theology of rest. But just to tease this out a little bit this morning, when work is an idol, rest feels irresponsible. Again, this hits home for me. And I know many of you, and I know this community, this is an idol in many of our lives. You check email in bed, you scroll through Slack on vacation, you feel guilty for slowing down, you lie awake at night thinking about deadlines and problems and what ifs, and you feel like the world might fall apart if you just take a day off. I remember just 6 weeks after Ethos had begun and I had just gotten out of an incredibly busy season, I found myself on my kitchen floor, curled up in a ball with no tears. Remember, that's a problem for me. And I was exhausted. And it felt like I had been running on a treadmill that was continually speeding up, and I couldn't get off, but when I looked around, I wasn't going anywhere. You ever have that before? Work becomes an idol. You're not really sure even how to change that. And we'll talk more about that in 2 weeks, but when work is worship, it honors God's pace. You build margin in rest. You take Sabbath not as a luxury, but as obedience. Rest becomes an act of faith, not laziness. Or in the words of John Mark Comer, Sabbath is resistance. Every time you rest, you're declaring, I'm not a slave. Or even furthermore, in the words of David, it's useless for you to work so hard from early morning until late at night because God gives rest to those that he loves, AKA you. Furthermore, when work is an idol, relationships are sacrificed for results, but when they're worship, relationships are the point of the results. People don't become a means to an end. Whew. Listen, I'll pull the curtain back just a bit on church. This is a real temptation for every pastor to begin to think, okay, if we can just get people to do this, then we can accomplish that. And there is some truth in that, but sometimes it's for your own ego. And I gotta check that frequently. And I'm grateful for a team who regularly checks that within themselves and within each other as well, because when work is an idol, people become tools. They just become kind of a means to an end. And we use other people, maybe even in your line of work, again, paid or unpaid, just to climb the ladder, to get the sale, to reach the goal. We see our children as a means of approval. If they can just do that, if they can just accomplish that, then other parents will think that I'm a good parent. Even your kids become a means to an end. Think of the dad or the mom who work endless hours for their quote unquote family, or the worker always competing to one-up one another. 10 years ago, maybe 11 years ago, now, my wife and I had gone on a date night that was very, very rare this particular season of our lives. And I had gone back to school to achieve a different degree, thinking that that degree will make me feel even more approved, and that others will then see me as more significant. I was working 2 jobs at the time, one of which was just storing up funds to start this church. And all of it felt like necessary and good work. Until the end of that date night, I hurried home to get into my office because I had a paper that was due at midnight. And my wife walked in the office and said, your kids and I barely know who you are anymore. I said, but babe, I'm doing all this for the family. She said, you're doing this for you. Work became an idol. But when work is worship, people are the goal. And your work simply becomes a way to love and to serve. And you measure success, hear me friends, not by profit, but by people flourishing because of your effort. Or in the words of Jesus, love your neighbor, just as you love yourself. Work is an idol when it becomes a means to an end. But work is worship when it's a means to display God's craftsmanship, God's glory, God's goodness. See, when work is an idol, it's just a means to an end. We just do it so that we can eventually stop doing it. Right? We just live for the weekend. It's the TGIF mentality. We grind through Monday, dreaming of Friday. Work becomes a tunnel that we just crawl through to kind of reach the quote unquote real life. One day I'll retire and I'll finally enjoy life. I can't wait for the next vacation. You're on vacation, planning the next vacation. Come on, somebody. That's my wife and I. We're like, what do you want to do next? We're like barely 24 hours into this thing, you know? But when work is just survival, it's not worship. And when you treat work as a means to escape, it always feels meaningless. You resent the very thing, work, that God designed to help bring you purpose. And if you're sitting here today and you're like, man, I don't feel like I have any purpose in my work. In fact, I'm trying to escape my work and get a different job. And that might be worthwhile. And that may be what the Spirit of God is leading you to do. But most of the time, it's not. Most of the time, God is actually instructing you to think differently, a new perspective, a new story about your current place of employment, your current education, your current opportunities tomorrow at 10 a.m. See, when work is worship, it becomes a means, no matter what you're doing, to display God's craftsmanship. I think of the baristas at the cafe across the highway, and we just have an incredible team, some young men, some young women who really see the vision of what we're trying to do there. We frequently refer to our cafe as a ministry of hospitality. In addition to the child care center that's hosted here Monday through Friday, these are ministries of hospitality with a mission statement to be a good neighbor. Neighbor is defined by Jesus in the story of the Good Samaritan. Well, our cafe in particular are baristas. Namely, one of them's in the foyer right now, Megan Cully. She's also our morning shift manager, and she does an incredible job of learning people's names, listening to their stories, following up with their stories the next week. Hey, how was that wedding? Tell me more. What happened? She'll have customers who will ask for her because they want to know how she's doing, because they've taken such an interest in them. My daughter, who's 16, works at the cafe on Saturday mornings, and she loves working alongside of Megan and Chloe and some of the other baristas and employees there. And I love it too, because my daughter will come home and she's like, Dad, you'll never believe what Megan was telling me about what the vision is for the cafe. I'm like, I think I know. And She was telling me that, like, we're there to, like, serve people and to create hospitable environments where people can see Jesus, not just in us preaching to them, but earning the right to be heard. And then we hear I'm like, baby, I've been telling you that for 2 years since this thing's been open. Yeah, but like a young girl told me, Dad, that's really cooler. That's cooler than you, you know? I'm like 6'7", you know, like, that's cool, right? Like, side note, my 11-year-old son, it's fall ball, picking names out of a hat. First name gets to pick the first number. He gets the name Judas Smucker. Judas like, oh, sweet, I get to pick number first. He goes, 67? I'm like, Bud, what? No, son, 3. You're always number 3. Allen Iverson, the greatest pound for pound NBA player of all time. That's you. Bryce Harper, that's you, son. He's like, nah, I want 67. There's no athlete in the history of the world that willingly chose 67 until this year. Man, if you're older than 40, we need to change this generation. Come on. Like we preach a whole sermon about, okay, here we go. But here's what happens, though, when you begin to view work as worship. It's no longer just work. Your work becomes witness. Or in the words of Paul, we are God's masterpiece. He created us anew in Christ Jesus so that we can do the good things that he planned for us long ago. Which is to say that when you teach a class well, when you build a wall straight, when you lead with humility, when you solve a problem with integrity, you're displaying what the Creator is like. You're putting God's craftsmanship on visible display. And that's worship to God. See, when work is worship, or idol rather, we use it to avoid pain or emptiness. But when it's worship, we use work to bring pain to God and let him redeem it through our work. I added this one fairly last minute because I was thinking of a friend of mine who many, many years ago had lost his wife. He's an incredible man. And during that season, while still having young kids at home, he poured himself entirely into his work as a means to escape the grief that he felt every time he walked into his house to see his kids without his wife. Years later, we sat down for lunch and he confessed, Jordan, I need to bring my pain to God. I've been using my work as an escape, but I want to begin to use my work as a way to help others who maybe have experienced similar pain, similar grief at the place where I work. Because when work is worship, you bring your wounds to God first because you know that he comforts us in all of our troubles so that we can comfort others too. When work is an idol, we crave recognition. We crave applause. But when it's worship, we seek faithfulness in God's pleasure. Whew. This is number 3 for me right here. Work as an idol lives for applause. You want your name on the project, the corner office, you want the credit. I'll tell you right now, man, this is when you hit the proverbial home run and you look around, you're like, who noticed? Who saw that, right? I praise God that I don't feel this weight anymore. But I used to go home on Sundays, and if I didn't receive positive feedback or enough positive feedback, like I couldn't rest. Like I couldn't even go to sleep at night. Like I couldn't even cheer on the Birds, the Eagles. Come on, somebody, God's favorite team. It was so heavy on me. I remember working with my therapist on this. I was like, I don't know what to do, but sometimes I know when I preached a crappy sermon, and yet I still want somebody's feedback and approval. And I've gotten to this place now, and it's taken time, where I don't need people's applause. I don't need people's proverbial praise or applause. And now I feel very confident. I know that someday I will, and you will too, stand before the Lord in the phrase, I hope that we all hear. And in honest to God, as presumptuous this may sound, this is the motivation for me to do this. That we would all hear, well done, good and faithful. Not well known, not successful, well done, good and faithful servant. It's faithfulness that God is after. Not one-off successes, not singular praise, not singular credit, not moments where somebody is shouting your name and giving you a post on Instagram and commenting a million times because your story was incredible. No, just like well done, good, that you could rest your head on your pillow at night and you sense, I worked for the Lord today. And I sense the pride of God saying, well done, good and faithful servant. Whatever you do, do it heartily. In other words, with all of your effort. Working as unto the Lord doesn't mean working less. It means working differently, working with more effort, a different type of effort, as though you're working to the Lord, not to men, not to women. When work is an idol, you forget who you're working for, but when work is worship, you remember who you are serving, that you're serving Christ in all things. And this is where we begin to close. See, when it's an idol, the boss, the client, or the market becomes your master. And you obey their demands above God. You forget that your true employer is Jesus. For those of you who can kind of reflect, and you know the story of Daniel in Babylon, he was surrounded by pressure, but he never forgot whose he was. He worked with excellence, but his loyalty always stayed with God. When work is worship, it looks like that. Every task, no matter how small, is service to Christ. Changing a diaper, managing a spreadsheet, building a house, all of it is sacred when it's done for Him. Again, in the words of Paul, remember the master you are serving is Christ. And so I want to just kind of bring this all the way home, kind of just like as practical as we can get. So maybe you heard some of those illustrations, some of those points, and you're like, okay, some of that resonated, but still, what does this mean? Let me get even more specific. As we think about our identity, as you think about what you do tomorrow at 1 p.m., do you know who you are apart from what you're doing? Or how about your motivation? Can you answer this question? Am I trying to serve others or am I trying to prove myself? Like, what's my motivation? The reasons behind what I'm doing or why I'm doing it. Or how about this, your pace? Do you rest with peace? Are you able to rest without feeling guilty? What about your fruit? Is my work making me more loving, patient, and kind, or more anxious, irritable, and proud? And if you would say, man, it's making me more anxious, irritable, and proud, that's why I need to find a different job, I would just suggest to you again, maybe that's true. But most likely, you just need a different perspective of your work. And that's not going to switch overnight. That's going to take time. We speak of this frequently, but it's a long obedience in the same direction. And when we stay committed, when we stay anchored, when we continue to view even our work through a biblical worldview, we will in time experience faithfulness, 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 fruitfulness. But that takes time. Or how about where you receive or give or desire for glory to go? When I succeed, who gets the credit? You or God? The gospel doesn't tell us to quit working, it tells us to quit striving. Very different. And to be quite honest, revolutionary too. Jesus said it like this: come to me, all of you who are weary, all of you who are burdened, and I will give you rest. My yoke. Now this phrase, yoke, not necessarily familiar to us today, but as Jesus was communicating this to an agriculturally familiar society, people instantly had an understanding of the metaphor that Jesus was using here. Think of two oxen being yoked by the neck together. He's saying, my yoke, when you yoke yourself to me, it's easy. But when you yoke yourself to something or someone else, it becomes a burden. You become burnt out. You become weary. You lose the proper motivation. You don't have contentment any longer. And you feel like you're running on that treadmill and you look around and nothing is changing. He says, my yoke is easy and my burden is light. So take my yoke, not yours. And a yoke, friends, is still work, but it's work with him, not work for approval. And that, friends, is the sound of work as worship. It's not absence of effort, but it's effort aligned with grace. And so as we conclude, here's what these two mindsets, worship and work as an idol, look like on a really practical level, side by side, beginning with your Monday morning. The idol mindset says, I have to prove tomorrow morning that I'm competent. I need people to know who I am and how good I am at what I do. A worship mindset says, God, thank you for another chance to serve. When you have a conflict at work, an idle mindset says they're threatening my reputation. I need to fight back. I need to let people know who I really am and that that's not really my fault. I need to let people know even that project that didn't go well, that I really didn't have anything to do with it. Really, so-and-so had more to do with that. But a worship mindset says this is a moment to display God's character. So I'm going to let you fight this battle for me. When you experience success as an idle mindset, you begin to assume I've earned this. A worship mindset says all good things come from you. Friends, there's nothing like some funerals that will help you remember that you didn't earn any of it. You're like, no, man, I'm self-made, Jordan. Pastor, like I built my own business. Like I worked hard, therefore I've achieved. Who put that breath in your lungs? In any moment? Could that breath even right now dissipate? How about the intellect that you have? Where'd that come from? Well, I study a lot. I read a lot. That's awesome. Who gave you the ability to do that? Who raised you in a home with the resources to have that? All good things come from the Lord. How about failure? You begin to think, I'm worthless. But a worship mindset says, no, my worth was settled at the cross. How about rest? I'm wasting time. No, I'm trusting God that you hold all things together and that when I rest, you're still working. So here's the shift. Don't just work to live, work to reveal. Don't just produce, participate. Don't just get through the week, bring God into the week, because work is not a prison that you have to endure until heaven. It's a partnership that previews heaven. Come on, somebody. Do you hear that? That's the opportunity before us. And I'm not suggesting that that's easy all the time. No, I'm not trying to paint this thing in such a way, use the illustration that Noah used last week, like some Bob Ross picture that just looks like, that just came together really quickly. No, like it's gonna take time. If anybody sold you a lie that following Jesus will be easy, I apologize on their behalf. Because following Jesus will require something of you, but it's always worth it. Following Jesus does require sacrifice, but that sacrifice, giving up your autonomy, allows you to receive His freedom. And it's His freedom that all of our hearts most desperately crave. So I'm not suggesting that this idea of work as worship, that this reality, that all of a sudden things get instantly better. I'm actually suggesting they might even get harder. Because the enemy will come after those who begin to use their work as a means to build the kingdom, to display God's craftsmanship, to give glory to the Father. But when we approach work as worship, we begin to experience what Genesis 1:31 describes. God saw all that He made and said, it was good. And you're able to look back even on the day of rest and say, I'm kind of proud of what's happened over the last week. Not because I did it all, but because I partnered with God. And we begin to find joy in the process, not just, hear me friends, not just the paycheck. And that's what we're gonna talk about next week. You can, if you're taking notes, you can write down the title next week right now. Jesus and your paycheck. We're gonna talk about money next week. Oh, here we go. Yeah, because friends, listen to me. Your paycheck forms you or deforms you more than we often give credit to. And so we need to discuss, okay, what does this look like if Jesus for me? And so you're like, I don't know if I'm gonna come to church next weekend. Like, watch online, because trust me if you will. Trust me if I earn any bit of trust in your life. Trust me that it will release you to feel more freedom about the way in which God desires for you to use your paycheck. And as a response, you will begin to experience life more to the full. But this week, before you start work, would you consider maybe just taking an image of this, screen grabbing it if you're watching online right now? Would you consider just praying this prayer? Just try this for the next 5 days. I just invite you, just for the next week, try praying this prayer when you wake up tomorrow morning. Lord, let my work today not be about earning worth, but about expressing love. Let my hands and my mind and my heart all be yours because I'm already yours. And when you start your week from that place of grace, things begin to change. You'll still work hard, but now your labor is light because you're no longer trying to carry what only Jesus can carry. Friends, we're talking about work because it's where you spend most of your life. And your work matters to God, and God matters to your work. So, Father, I pray for my friends right now in this moment. And I ask that you would seal in our hearts anything that's been spoken today that you desire for us to hear. Anything that I may have said that distracts us from who Jesus really is, the plan that he has for our lives individually and collectively as a community here at Ethos, I just pray, God, that you would allow that to kind of fall by the wayside. And so, Holy Spirit, we just invite you now to share with us, to speak to us what it is that you want us to do with what we just heard. In Jesus'